Well, our dús a cardja ma buhas de agus na dini ag skull Saru McGill, mar Shamsa Kanch and Shaw Anocht agus Tomas Mór agamsa Padraig McGill agus na Leora Scríb sé as Sheelam go mé sé hansasta Seachtan Alana mar Shaw Ackroyd. Har stands a republic session in Kesht, and it begs another question: what republic? What republic? This state is not the republic envisaged by those who wrote the proclamation. They did have a vision for a real republic, a republic for all the people of this island. And that's clear when you read the proclamation. It speaks in its opening sentence to Irish men and Irish women. At a time when women didn't have the vote, this simple address was in itself a progressive, radical statement. Irish men and Irish women is what it says. It doesn't say unless you're gay, or unless you're a traveller, or unless you're poor, or unless you're a unionist, or unless you live in rural Ireland, or unless you have a disability. No, the proclamation speaks of pursuing the happiness and prosperity of the whole nation and all its parts, guarantees civil and religious liberty and equal rights and equal opportunities, and commits the Republic to cherishing all the children of the nation equally. And these core values are mirrored in the democratic programme of the First Dáil. And in words that resonate just months before another budget will strip billions out of public services, the democratic programme set as the first duty of the government of the Republic to make provision for the physical, mental and spiritual well-being of the children, to secure that no child shall suffer hunger or cold from lack of clothing, food or shelter, but that all shall be provided with the means and facilities requisite for their proper education and training. Now, these are words that speak to us in a society where children and adults go hungry, where 500,000 citizens are out of work, where emigration is thriving. And the forced emigration of generations of Irish citizens is a telling and shameful indictment of this state and of successive governments. My Shiv, you didn't go. It's a solitary illustration, decade by decade, generation by generation, of failure. 100 years ago, partition created two conservative states, ruled. I'm hard afraid of I'm coming up behind. I'm Russian. Partition created two conservative states, ruled in their own narrow self-interest by two conservative elites. The northern state was a one-party state which reinforced the institutionalised use of discrimination, sectarianism and segregation. And despite the very significant progress that's been made, arising from the peace process and the Good Friday Agreement, the legacy of structured discrimination and inequality still needs to be tackled in a focused and systematic way. But partition also affects this part of the island. This state is the product of a counter-revolution that followed the rising and of a terrible civil war which tore the heart out at that time of what remained of the generosity of our national spirit. And as the idealism of the aborted revolution waned, a native conservative elite replaced the old English elite with little real change in the organisation of Irish society and no real movement towards a rights-based dispensation. Instead, conservatism ruled. Religion was hijacked by mean men who used the gospel not to empower but to control. And narrow moral codes were enforced to subvert the instinctive generosity of our people. Women were discriminated against. Gay and lesbian citizens were denied equality under the law. And all the while, scandals like the abuse in the industrial schools, the Magdalen laundries, Bethany Home, and the barbaric practice of symphysiotomy were tolerated and encouraged. Those who suffered most were mostly poor. The arts were censored. None of our great novelists, none of our great literary figures escaped without having their works censored. Our language was undermined. Ní féidir dom canslibse in Yelganach, mar níl Magilga Romai. Ac ag an Cairna ní féidir a landini an Shaw about the Misha Hegwa, ma bay me canslibse in Yelga. Our culture was corroded. Millions fled. From the beginning of this state, millions have fled to England, to Australia, and to the USA. And the lesser people would not have survived. And it certainly is not the people's fault. It is not the fault of citizens. The political culture, whether in the north or here, the scandals of backhanders and brown envelopes, of the banking and financial institutions, of the developers, of the golden circles, exemplify the political culture and how the elites held sway. And moreover, the institutions of this state, whether the media or academia, as well as the political elites, are very partitionist. They have their backs to the border. While they're generally benign, policymakers know or knew little about the North and cared even less. Their concern was and remains to protect the interests of the establishment as they understand it. And I'm minded here of the words of US President Rutherford Hayes, writing in 1876. And he was writing about the USA at this time, and he was echoing concerns that Abraham Lincoln had earlier expressed. And President Hayes wrote, "This is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people no longer. This is a government of corporations, by corporations, for corporations." He could have been writing about Ireland today. Liam Mellows warned of this in the treaty debates when he noted that when men get into power, they will want to hold on to that power. Now, of course, there are exceptions to everything that I have said, both at an individual level and at a collective level. But the prevailing sense among the policymakers in Dublin is to perpetuate the status quo. And this will only be changed when there's a natural national spirit, when it's recreated to replace the nonsense which remains popular in some circles that this state is the nation, that Ireland ends at the border, at Dundalk or at Lifford. And this is a very easy, lazy option which conceived the politics of Section 31 and the gradual erasure which accompanied it of patriotic music and songs from our so-called national airwaves. We're living in a post-Good Friday Agreement Ireland. People in the North know that. People here are not conscious of it. Because in this state, nowhere are the equality safeguards or the parity of esteem measures of the Good Friday Agreement reflected, either in our governance or the protection for citizens. On the contrary, the Irish government, as part of a cost-cutting exercise, merged the Irish Human Rights Commission with the Equality Authority. The government has refused, point you made earlier, has refused to introduce equality proofing legislation. The Good Friday Agreement also envisaged that there would be a Bill of Rights for the North and a Charter of Rights for the island of Ireland. There is no Bill of Rights or Charter of Rights. There's no civic forum. The Good Friday Agreement removed the Government of Ireland Act, under which the British claimed jurisdiction over the North, and provided for a poll on Irish unity. Such a poll would provide a unique opportunity for real, inclusive and constructive debate on the future of the people of this island. Yet the government in Dublin shies away from such a debate. It has no strategy to win unionists to embrace a united Ireland, and until recent events forced the issue, the government had no consistent or strategic engagement with the British over matters arising from the Good Friday Agreement and subsequent agreements. That's not to say that I believe that this government is averse to dealing with these issues. Not at all. It's simply doing what governments here do, including the last Fianna Fáil government, and that is to do as little as possible. And unionism knows this as well as the rest of us. If unionism saw a real commitment to equality by the Dublin government, this would have a real and positive effect on those unionists who want to, who long to live in harmony with their neighbours. Orange is one of our national colours. Most of us don't appreciate that. The unionists know this also. There's no design plan for reconciliation, but we all share a responsibility to give leadership in spite of opposition and adversity, and perhaps the Civic Forum could be a vehicle for this. So the imperative is for the government to be fully engaged as it's entitled to, indeed as it's obliged to in the North. Not in a threatening or an interfering way, but under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement and other agreements. And as sections of unionism, like others, adjust to a more pragmatic and positive dispensation and adjust to the merits and advantages of cross-border cooperation, particularly on economic issues, we will see more progress. No one, either Sammy Wilson or the new guy coming in, can argue that an economy of 6.4 million citizens, consumers and taxpayers would be stronger. 2 years ago, Fine Gael and Labour promised a democratic revolution. Instead, they opted for cuts to public services and greater centralisation of power. Instead of creating a more effective, transparent and accountable democracy, the government moved to abolish the Seanad, to cut the number of elected representatives in the Dáil and in local government, to get rid of many tiers of local government, to get rid of the uterus, and to centralise even more power and authority in their own hands. Instead of initiating real reform, Fine Gael is power grabbing, and Labour is acquiescing to this. And at the heart of the debate on the Seanad is the issue of equality of citizens. Only 1% of citizens have a vote in Seanad elections, while others have multiple votes. And that is why Sinn Féin will not support a proposal to retain the present Seanad and why we will campaign for its abolition. We argued that a genuinely progressive government would have given the future of the Seanad to the Constitutional Convention for discussion. I was there. The citizen delegates were frustrated that they could not discuss this matter. It could have considered, the government could have, the option of making the Seanad democratic and accountable, representative, of making it able to act as a meaningful check on the dominance of the Dáil, and it chose not to. And even the government chief whip has acknowledged that its record on reform and accountability has been deplorable. In my experience, and I'm only there 2.5 years or thereabouts, the Dáil is a dysfunctional forum. Its formal protocols, which were inherited, was it will change from London, operate in a time warp, operate in a bubble, and people in there, even though they're decent people, are immune at times to the harsh and unfair regime visited by the government on citizens who elect it. Austerity. How could you have austerity in a republic based upon the proclamation that I have just quoted from? In a real republic, citizens would have a wrap-around health service from the cradle to the grave. Billions of taxpayers' money that could and should have been invested in jobs creation would not have been given to the banks. Last Wednesday, I visited St Mary's Care Centre in my own constituency. The staff there look after 100 of our most vulnerable and disabled citizens. These are people who cannot move, who need to be washed and dressed and fed, citizens who have dementia and mental health issues and severe epilepsy. They have lost 7 million in cuts from 2008. They have had to cut meals to people attending their day services. That St Mary's cannot feed vulnerable citizens is a huge indictment of this government and of this state and of this republic. During the years of the Celtic Tiger, I and others in Sinn Féin advocated that the surplus would be used to build public services, especially education and health, to build infrastructure, to create sustainable jobs. The political establishment, including those who crashed the economy, accused us of being economic illiterates. They wouldn't socialise the wealth, yet they have no problem socialising the debt. So I believe that a real republic, rooted in core democratic principles, shaped by the political, social and economic realities of today, because this is not 1916, a commitment to the unity of Catholic, Protestant and dissenter, and the rejection of sectarianism, I believe that such a republic is possible. Politics must empower citizens. It must be inclusive, democratic, accountable and citizen-based, and rooted legislatively in equality, human rights and communal solidarity. And we must have a tolerance for other people's views, opinions and beliefs. A republic must share its wealth equitably, has to look after the aged, has to look after the young, has to look after people with disabilities, has to liberate all sections of our people and deliver the highest standards of public service. And a republic which has a sense of itself would defend and promote its language and culture and ensure that equality is the basis on which it plans, promotes and sustains the language. And why can't the Constitution reach out to the children of the diaspora, including letting Irish passport holders, wherever they live, have a vote in presidential elections? So, I believe that all of this is possible. 20 years ago, when the peace process was first muted, reams of words, harsh words, were written about Hugh Adams. There was vilification. It was said to be impossible. Well, it happened. It wasn't easy. It isn't over. Still has to be worked out. Our island is in transition. A real republic is possible. And a small start would be if there was a real commitment to the full implementation of the Good Friday Agreement across the island, not just in the north, but across the island. That would be good for all of us here. It would be good for the Unionists. We deserve better. We can't change it. We have to decide to do that. Gora Míle Mágaibh.